My dear friends, we just ended today's Jewish festival of Shavuot, the date when the early rabbis envisioned that the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. Given once, but received whenever Torah enters our lives and speaks to not only our hearts, but to our world. 613 commandments, mitzvot, have been derived from this love letter from God to the Jewish people and all humanity we call the Torah. Rabbis Harold Kushner and Jack Reamer summon us to acquaint ourselves in a meaningful way with our Mount Sinai legacy. They write, we owe it to our ancestors to keep Torah alive because our ancestors struggled to preserve our way of life. They knew this Torah to be their most precious gift to us. We owe it to our children to keep our Torah alive. For why should our children be spiritually poor when the riches of this heritage can be theirs? We owe it to the world to keep Torah alive. For this is a message the world needs to hear. Ain't that the truth? As we sang in this service from Deuteronomy 6:5, you shall teach these commandments to your children. Uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha, when you lie down and when you get up. The 613 mitzvahs are further divided into 365 negative commands, thou shalt not, and 248 positive guideposts to live by as a society. That adds up to 613. Why not list more positive commands than 248, given the joyful, loving, compassionate nature of Judaism, whether lying down at night or rising up to a new day? Because the mitzvahs of Judaism are about human nature, which involves choosing goodness and decency over our darker impulses, which can be larger than the positive ones. And often we need to remember what not to do and how not to be as a society, just as God's will is often not clear or nearly as clear as what God's will is not. While we live in fragile and uncertain times, what happened on February 23rd and May 27th is clearly not God's will. I checked my calendar, and on Sunday, February 23rd, between temple training on how to defend helpless Memphis immigrant families and a late afternoon confirmation class, I went for a quick run around my neighborhood. I do not know what my 25-year-old son, Jake, was doing in New York on February 23rd in the afternoon, perhaps going for a run too. That same day, a young, unarmed black man, my own son's age, Ahmed Arbery, went for a jog in a suburban neighborhood in Georgia, only he was gunned down by a lynch mob of 4 men. One even filmed it on his cell phone. The 4 perpetrators and bystanders were not even charged for the slaying until video came to light, showing Ahmad trying to run away and simply get up before being murdered. And you shall teach these commandments to your children means, quite simply, do not murder my unarmed, innocent children when they are standing up or when they lie down too. This week, on May 27th, a 46-year-old Minneapolis restaurant worker who had been detained on a minor charge of allegedly using a counterfeit $20 bill at a convenience store was not only handcuffed and thrown to the ground, an officer then placed his knee on the neck of George Floyd as George kept saying, "I can't breathe." In the video of that slaying, policemen hold the victim to the ground while one continues to press his knee to George's neck. "Your knee in my neck, I can't breathe. Mama, mama." A guy whose nickname was the Gentle Giant pleaded. The Gentle Giant grew silent and motionless, unable to get up from lying down. Among the more beautiful images of this Shavuot holiday that's ending is that of the marriage between God and the Jewish people, with the Torah itself as the covenant of marriage, the ketubah. Because freedom from slavery in Egypt 49 days ago on Passover was not enough for ex-slaves, Jews. We needed guideposts for living, a moral toolkit, so that the anger and outrage of slavery didn't turn our ancestors into becoming like the monsters who enslaved us. And that was the reason Martin Luther King Jr. not only preached nonviolence, it was the reason why he came back to Memphis in February of '68. His greatest disappointment was when the February peaceful protest of the sanitation workers turned violent with looting and bloodshed. King modeled this idea: to reveal justice, you have to unveil the evil. The murder of George Floyd and the lynching hunt down of Ahmaud Arbery and all the others is the evil. The looting and burning of stores and the violent chaos of criminal activity in Minneapolis and other cities is a disservice to the memory of the Gentle Giant, to Ahmaud Arbery, to Breonna, and it's a disservice to changing the separate and unequal justice systems in America. We must change once and for all. The Jewish people's ketubah, the blueprint for our relationship to God and with the world, does include lines like, "You shall love, and I am with you in your distress." And we see living expressions of these Torah verses in the doctors and nurses who are still lying down beside dying COVID-19 patients right now in Memphis. And we witness the love and modeling of what it means to be with total strangers in their distress when any of you get up to bring food, deliver masks, make comfort calls to the 1.7 million Americans quarantined or infected by COVID-19. Our marriage contract with God, however, also commands tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shalt thou pursue, and lo tirtzach, thou shalt not murder. And our covenant further demands one law for the stranger and citizen alike, the Torah says. Juxtapose, if you will, the COVID-19 lifesavers, the doctors, nurses, people on the front lines, with the perpetrators and bystanders of an ingrained system and cycle of racial injustice in this country. The early rabbis envisioned that the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, given once, but received whenever Torah not only speaks to our hearts, but when it impacts the world right now. Justice, justice shall you pursue, speaks as much to America in 2020 as it did in 1200 BCE at Mount Sinai. Every child of God, in every time and place, the Torah says, deserves justice, period. Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd are only the most recent victims of our own apathy and excuses. Sure, the officers are guilty, but we are all responsible. Rather than face our obligation to others, we tend to demonize, divide, rationalize. We condone, ignore, overlook, tolerate, even justify the immoral, illegal, indefensible state of affairs, whether with criminal justice or COVID-19. Sure, outbreaks cannot be stopped, but pandemics can be stopped. Instead of facing our inaction, we condone, ignore, overlook, even rationalize behavior, justify the immoral and indefensible spread of this virus. The senseless deaths of unarmed black men disproportionately gunned down, as well as most of the 100,000 COVID-19 deaths. These deaths are not only sad and tragic. For God's sake, they were avoidable and preventable. We can survive sadness and get past anger, but we must never succumb to hopelessness or helplessness. It's over in this lifetime for those already dead, which is why it's on us not to keep politics alive, but to keep the Torah's moral teachings alive, because our nation and world need justice, and the Torah's teachings on compassion, empathy, decency, that's what the Torah teaches, and we need it now more than ever. Through living a life based on internal character instead of outside color, by living a life based on preserving the lives of others instead of just self-preservation, self-fulfillment. While the victims uvshochlecha uvkumecha can no longer get up because of a neck press or lie down without an oxygen ventilator, while it's too late for them, it is not too late for the rest of us to heed the Torah's call. I know how weary some of you are, and I can only imagine how angry victims' families of preventable deaths are. But God assures our people, Eheyeh imach, I will be with you through it all. Do not cower, do not fear, do not lose hope, do not despair. We owe it to God, my friends, to continue to share God's dream of a world where humanity is the only race and where other nations are more than just the source of our own problems. We owe it to God to live the words of Torah, full stop.